Welcome to episode 27 of Shane Talks. If you enjoyed last week's 2 hours and 45 minutes of content, get ready because we're talking about my favorite genre tonight. So this is probably going to be about like 4 hours long with me and Jason. So again, I am joined by Jason L. Bayer, my awesome co-host of this thing. We're back to Sun King beers this week, and it's kind of turning into a regular thing that I double fisted every week now. So I'm going to talk about the beer that I'm drinking that Jason's not drinking today, and that's called Indie Turns 200. It's from Sun King. It's an Applejack inspired cocktail beer that's aged in bourbon barrels. So it's got a really sweet upfront apple flavor to it. Then that bourbon flavor kicks in hardcore.
I hate
And
bourbon flavored beers.
I know you do,
I
and
don't
that's why.
deserve to be in there.
But man, like it's got like a very apple cidery aftertaste to it. Like it's really weird. Like it tastes like apple juice up front, then that the bourbon hits hard, and you're like, that's a lot of bourbon. And then after I drink it, like it's just like a lingering like apple cider type flavor in my mouth. It's really good, and I specifically wanted to drink it this week because of the fact that it's the bicentennial beer for the founding of Indianapolis. What would that be? It was January 6th of 1821, I guess. Since we're doing a time travel movie, what better than a bicentennial beer, right? Like, that worked out in my brain. But more excitedly, today, Sun King released their new series of sour beers, and you and I both love sour beers. It's a series called Mixed Emojis. They've done 3 flavors. Tonight, I chose to go with the raspberry. Is that what you went with also?
It is.
How do you feel about it?
Actually, haven't had a taste yet.
Oh, there you go.
So
Take a quick drink of it real quick.
It's very smooth.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of sour to it. It almost tastes like, and I think you mentioned this previously, maybe. It almost tastes like juice instead of beer.
Correct.
So it tastes like raspberry juice.
It's technically considered a Berliner Weiss, but they put so much fruit in it that, I mean, like you can see the cascading that's happening like on the side of my
Well, not only that, but like even in the beer itself, it is not. It's so thick, and you don't even see. Like, I'm not even seeing activity inside of the beer.
Sure.
Like, there's no bubbles coming up that I can see.
Nope.
Oh, I'm sorry. I think I saw 2 just now. So
it is definitely a fruit heavy sour beer, and I think it's delicious.
It's so thick it almost is like a smoothie.
Yeah. When you and I had talked about it, you originally asked me if you should put it in your freezer, and I told you no, like don't do that. But I'm almost curious what would happen if somebody did. Like, I wonder if it would actually come out like a smoothie beer at that point. So, sometime I may need to try that. In the next couple weeks,
make sure that your freezer's clean.
Sure.
Just in case.
In the next couple weeks, we have 2 other flavors that we can do: the pineapple, and the mango.
Mango, that's right.
So I really enjoy the raspberry version. I was pretty sure of the 3 flavors that was the one I was going to like the most. So I think it's a really tasty beer. So those just came out today. Well, yesterday by the time this podcast comes out.
I really like pineapple, so I'm looking forward to that one.
Nice. All right. So real quick, the first thing that we need to address is the 2 different types of time movies, and we're shifting next week's episode to be the other kind. Today we're talking about actual time travel movies, which involves a character or a group of characters moving from one time period to a different time period. Time loop films involve usually a single character or sometimes a group of characters who are reliving the same events over and over again, which is technically not time travel, it's time looping. So we divided those 2 things up into 2 separate episodes. So today we are just going to talk about time travel, which means the main characters either are affected by somebody from a different time period, or they themselves travel to a different time period. When the main characters travel to a different time period, it's usually known as like the fish out of water thing. Something like the movie Black Knight comes to mind, which was just a Kid in King Arthur's Court type movie. Like the main character gets sent to a different time period in the past. Army of Darkness is the same way. You have a main character that goes back and is out of his element. That's why it's called the fish out of the water. They either have technology that, or like they have knowledge of things that haven't come true yet in the past. The other kind of time travel movie is the futures in danger concept, where somebody from the future comes back in time to prevent future events from happening. Those are the two most common used styles of time travel storytelling. There's also this gets really complicated. I'm gonna try to be as not complicated as I can. There is constant time travel and there is relative time travel. Constant time travel means anything that has ever happened will always happen. So if somebody goes back in time and pushes somebody down in the past, that event always happened no matter what. Like it's a causality loop where no matter what happens in the future, that person will always travel back in time to do that thing in the past. The more commonly used time travel thing is called relative time travel, which means the events in the universe is relative to our storytelling protagonist. He is aware of things, like if a character travels back into time, they're aware of their original timeline, and if they go back and change something, like how Marty McFly makes his family better inadvertently when he travels back to the future, those are he still has the memories of his original timeline, but he has changed the timeline now, so nobody else remembers anything from the original timeline. It's relative to Marty McFly because he remembers both versions of the timeline. So the relative time travel and constant time travel, we'll touch on both of them a little bit in the movies that we're going to talk about. Some of them do a good job of eventually being constant time travel, but the other disclaimer that I'll say about this is time travel is jacked up. I want to believe it's real. I like the concept of time travel and things like that, but this is all fiction. So setting up your own time travel rules is really kind of more important to me, as long as the story follows the rules that are set up in that time travel universe.
Which plenty of them set up their rules and then just constantly break them.
That is correct. And
then most of the time it doesn't work well, but then you get something like Endgame.
Yeah. So I was going to do the top 10 movies. I put up the poll a couple of weeks ago on people's favorite time travel movies, which then spawned the question about time loop movies, which caused us to break it up into two separate things. But we had a tie for 10th/11th place, so we're going to have 11 movies to talk about. And the top two vote-getting ones extremely make me happy. They're two of my favorite time travel movies of all time, is Back to the Future 1 and 2. I got the poster for 2, and I got the poster for Bill and Ted behind me also. You're shaking your head. What's shaking your head about?
I know that you love them and that you think they're the best trilogy of all time. But Back to the Future 2 is nowhere near as good as the first one. And I don't know, like the second one and the third one are just so I like aspects of the second one, but the overall it's just not I just don't think it's that great of a movie. So
I mean, honestly, if we want to, we can technically talk about the third one. It does come in much later down on the list, but so all three of the Back to the Future films made the top 11 in vote getting on the website. So the first one, we've got Marty in 1985, travels back in time to 1955. His life's pretty crappy in the beginning. He inadvertently messes up his parents' meeting, and then has to find... so Doc Brown is the guy who built the time machine in 1985, sends him back to 1955. He has to then...
Total spoiler alert.
I mean, I feel like people won't be listening to this if they haven't seen the movie in the last 35 years. There's got to be a moratorium on things. If I can spoil The Sixth Sense for people on this podcast, I feel like this one's much older. Anyway, so he travels back. He has to figure out a way to get back to 1985. This movie introduces a concept called the grandfather paradox. The grandfather paradox is if you go back in time and either kill your grandparents or prevent your grandparents from meeting, would you actually be able to do that? Because in theory, if they don't meet, your existence is erased. So if your existence is erased, then that means you never actually were able to go back in time and stop that from happening. So it creates a thing called the grandfather paradox, which a lot of time travel movies just don't address. They just like are, we're not going to address the fact that that would potentially happen. So the second one does a little more time. The first one really is just jumping back to 1955, fish out of water scenario. Marty's got to navigate a week in 1955 before him and Doc can attempt to send him back to the future. Second one, well, the cliffhanger of the first movie, Doc shows up with a flying time machine, totally weirded out clothes, and tells them that they've got to go to the future. So third one, a lot more time travel involved. We get to go to the future, to 2015. And so here's the thing. I think this is why this is where my romance with Back to the Future 2 comes into play. In 1989.
Okay.
What's that?
You accidentally said 3 at one point.
Oh,
so
okay.
Don't worry about it. You're good. Yeah, we're talking about 2.
My romance of it is at 9 and 10 years old when I watched it a lot, seeing the future in 2015, that was cool to me. I really enjoyed, that's what the future's going to be, flying cars and TVs that have 8 screens on, or 8 shows on them. And I think a lot of movies that depicted the future when I was younger, I really enjoyed. I'm a big sci-fi fan, so Star Trek and Star Wars and all the things that I saw as this is what the future is going to be. I really kind of gravitated towards those. So I agree that the first film is far superior, but I think as a child, I really enjoyed the second one more because I got to see what the future was possibly going to be.
And I mean, they also definitely capitalized on the Steven Spielberg aspect of being produced by it, with all of the movie or the product tie-ins with Pizza Hut and Pepsi and
Jaws 19.
Jaws 19. But then you also had the Mattel hoverboard,
yeah.
Which is literally if you're in our age range, you wanted one. I don't care what you say. Don't tell me you didn't like this movie. I liked the movie a lot more when I was younger because of these aspects to it. Or watching it as an adult, it's just it's number 1 holds up so well, whereas the second and third ones don't for me, and that's the problem. Is and I remember them fondly for the most part, but when watching them nowadays, it's just wow,
well, and I think the first one holds up so well because it's literally just kind of an emotional story. It's literally just I get to go back in time and hang out with my dad when he was my age, and they do a good job of setting up at the beginning how it's kind of not a good family environment. They don't really get along, and it seems like a family that probably would have ended up getting divorced at some point.
Which is hilarious, right? Because if you look at that first movie, you have that whole scenario where it's like you said, the mom's an alcoholic. Things are not going well at the house. The brothers were working at a KFC or something like that. And everybody needs to borrow the same vehicle. And then he inadvertently, like you said, fixes it and makes it better for himself.
Yeah.
Yet they still live in the exact same house.
Sure.
It's just BS, sure. and that's one of the problems that you do run in with time travel movies. So would the parents make all the same choices if all the things, because that neighborhood in one at the beginning of it, you get I never got this sense when I was young, right? Because when you're young, you don't really notice these things.
Sure.
But I didn't really notice how run down it is at the beginning of the movie. The whole neighborhood is just kind of lower middle class essentially, or and so you have this whole aspect of they're lower middle class, but then at the end of the movie they're higher middle class.
Sure.
And would you grow up in Indianapolis or would you grow up in Geist? Sure. If you had the option, if it was an option, which one would you grow up in, and which one would parents take their kids to? It's just kind of silly.
The only argument I can make about it is they do admit that his first book just got published, so he hasn't hit it big or anything yet. So they might still have to have afforded that lower class. Maybe they're going to move it a year or two after this book starts selling really well.
Okay, you could go that route, but like they drive a Beamer.
True.
They're
Yeah,
giving Marty
you're
a
right.
brand new truck.
Yeah, good
Like
call. They've
so
obviously
like
got money now.
well, and I mean, like you said, it could be new money, but like the dad was already driving a Beamer. Like I don't know. Like I feel like it, and the whole neighborhood looks different too, right? Like it doesn't look like
Sure.
it's as low on the chain as it would be at the beginning of the movie.
Well, then it's
Which
also like one of the things I really find funny. What you commenting on the way the neighborhood looks at the beginning of the movie when he travels back to 1955 and they've got like the advertisement billboard. It makes it look like it's going to be like a really nice neighborhood and whatnot
well, and
on the advertisement.
when you well, in that time frame, you had all these prefab homes that were
Sure.
going up super super fast, and like that was probably the biggest housing boom right after the Second World War ish.
Sure.
I know my grandfather got a bunch of money that he could like because of the fact that he served in the army during World War II. He
Nice.
got like a huge chunk of money. He literally just went and paid for a house with cash. And
That's
then
awesome.
no wonder they like. Don't get me wrong. Like everybody has to earn their way, but when you are given a house by the federal government, it's kind of easy to like work your way up.
Sure.
It's a whole lot easier if you're not really thinking about the aspects of owning the home or paying for the home, like most people do with mortgages or whatever. So I mean, it is what it is. But I also like that when in the second one, when he goes back to his house and it's like, it's essentially the ghetto, right?
Yep.
Like, I mean, it's a really run down neighborhood. And so here you see this one neighborhood, all over the aspect ratio, or not aspect ratio, but you know what I mean, like all over the board as far as like who would live there.
For sure.
So,
but yeah, so while they're in the future in 2015, Biff ends up stealing the time machine, goes all the way back to 1955 because obviously somehow he knows how to use a DeLorean and the fact that he has to get up to 88 miles an hour.
duh.
Somehow. But so anyway, then he comes back from 1955 to 2015, which is kind of a gray area as far as storytelling goes in this, because in theory, after he's gone back and given himself the book, the 2015 that he comes back to should have already changed. Now, the argument for that is the fact that, as far as the movie goes, Doc and Marty have already gotten Jennifer out of the house. So, in theory, while they were running down the street carrying Jennifer's body, the neighborhood theoretically could have changed. But I've looked hard to see if that happened, and it doesn't look like it does to me. So, little storytelling, blah blah there, where Biff comes back to 2015 that should be 2015 alternate, but it doesn't look like anything's changed as far as what we see when he comes back. So then Doc and Marty take the time machine and go back to 1985, and it's the alternate version that we were talking about where the town is pretty much a shithole. Like, you've got murder, like, chalk outlines on the floor when he's walking, like, down the streets of his neighborhood. There's, like, all kinds of cars on fire, and it's basically a lawless country because Biff's in charge at that point. So then they have to figure out that issue and then go back to 1955, which I find it interesting that the original plot, they were going to go back to like 1960 something, like during the JFK era. They were going to go back there, but Universal found it to be too cost prohibitive to redress the set since they already had everything set up for 1955. So they were like, nah, you guys are just going to go back to 1955 again. So we kind of got gypped out of seeing like another incarnation of Hill Valley, but it still worked, and it's still like storyline wise, I still enjoy the fact that there's the two Martys at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. Like,
well, and you think about it though, like, yeah, it might have been cool to see a different version of Hill Valley at that point in time, but from a storytelling aspect, I would find it so much more complicated to do that because, like,
sure.
At least going back to 1955, you're literally just essentially doing the time heist with the that Avengers does. Is like you literally just have to go back and do one thing, and you know where he's gonna be.
Yeah, that's
for
true.
Pretty much the entire night. Whereas, like, if you go to 1960, you would have to. Oh, he placed a bet but what if it was not him who placed the bet? What if it was a crony of his that placed the bet? And then he go, it just sounds way more complicated. So,
and you make a very valid argument. You make a very valid argument, and to the point, if they waited those 5 or 6 years, like that still gives Biff time to start making a fortune during that. So going back to 1955 when he magically made it to where he was going to give himself the book, just kind of works out really well. So we'll just jump to the third movie since it's on the list. At the end of this movie, the cliffhanger is the DeLorean gets struck by lightning and you have no idea where it is. And then Marty gets a letter saying that Doc Brown traveled back to 1885 and Marty just needs to not worry about it. Doc just wants Marty to get back to 1985 and go on with his life. Of course, Marty's an 18-year-old kid. He doesn't listen to him. So Marty recruits the 1955 Doc Brown to help him. So 1885 Doc Brown, he was actually 1985 Doc Brown, hid the time machine in a cave so that 1985 Marty in 1955 with 1955 Doc could go dig up the DeLorean and rebuild it so that it could travel through time again. They successfully do that, but Marty has him program it to go back to September 1st of 1885. Why? I don't know. Like, if I knew that Doc Brown landed in 1885 on January 1st, and then I knew that he died on September 10th or whatever, or 7th or 8th or whatever it is day that he dies, I'd want to give myself more than like a week to try to save his life. So I probably would have landed like 2 or 3 days after he got there, and just been like, let's do this. And the storytelling reason they give is the fact that he doesn't bury the DeLorean until like September 1st or whatever, but that's just too convoluted for me. I would have just jumped back to a couple of days earlier and given myself like 9 months to figure out how to save Doc's life instead of just a week.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, I also think the reason why I enjoy the second one so much is because there just is a lot of time travel in there. There's the future, there's the alternate 1985, and then there's 1955 again, so it's kind of nostalgic seeing the first movie from a different perspective. This one literally is just going back to 1885, and it's really kind of a weak story. They save Clara, all of a sudden Clayton Ravine is no longer Clayton Ravine, it's Shonash Ravine now. Like, just, one of those. There's not a lot of good stuff to talk about with the third movie. Again, Thomas F. Wilson does an awesome job in every iteration of Biff that he does, so his, like, old-timey, like, Western Biff is pretty fun. I like the fact that they set that up in the second movie when he's watching Fistful of Dollars, whatever the Clint Eastwood movie is that he's watching in the
second. Is that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly?
Oh, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, yeah, that's what it is. So I kind of like the fact that they foreshadowed that a little bit with Marty doing the exact same thing. But yeah, the third one, just not the best of all of them, and it literally kind of ends up being a rehashing of the first movie because they're just trying to figure out how to get the DeLorean to get up to 88 miles an hour so they can go back to the present. So definitely the worst of the three, I will definitely agree with that. So that was number 7, it looks like, on the list. Number 3 is Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. This one has a lot of time travel in it. Yes, Wild Stallions, baby. This one has a lot of time travel in it. Let's see. So, general gist of the movie, Bill and Ted have a history report that they have to do. Bill and Ted...
They're flunking history.
800 years in the future, the music of Wild Stallions, their garage band that they have, ends up being the music that saves reality and saves the world. That actually gets kind of twisted a little bit in Face the Music, but I kind of like the way they did it, so I give them a pass on it. But anyway, so Rufus is sent back from 800 years in the future so that he can help the Great Ones make sure that they don't get broken up by failing history. They use the time machine to go back to the year 1410 BC to pick up Socrates, 1209 AD for Genghis Khan, 1429 to pick up Joan of Arc, 1488 to pick up the Princess Babes, 1805 to grab Napoleon Bonaparte, 1810 to grab Ludwig von Ludwig von Beethoven. That was a tongue twister.
How much have
1863.
you had to drink?
Not even a full beer yet, except for that sip of that bourbon. 1863 for Abraham Lincoln, 1879 for Billy the Kid, and 1901 for Sigmund Freud. So there's a lot of time travel going on in this movie. A lot of time periods represented. I think it's a lot of fun. I like it's like multiple fish out of waters because while they're not necessarily the main characters, you have a bunch of displaced time figures in the modern present day.
Yeah, it's definitely multiple people out of order, out of fish out of water.
Mm-hmm.
They only focus really. I mean, like if you think about the whole thing, they spend the most amount of time in what medieval England
And Billy the Kid, probably.
And the western town
yeah.
with Billy the Kid. Besides that, everything else is like zip in, zip out. We're getting back to San Dimas. Like
Socrates / Socrates is a couple of minutes because like they go and they watch his speech, but literally like he has like a 2-minute speech and then it's hey come roll with us in the time phone booth. But yeah, like Joan of Arc, Freud, Abraham Lincoln, it's all just pop in, grab them, pop back out. So while there is all that time travel, the more important part of the story is the multiple fish out of waters in modern day, well, quote unquote, modern day 1988 San Dimas. The mall scene comes to mind.
And what?
The mall scene.
Okay, the mall scene. I always think of Napoleon being the ultimate fish out of water in this movie, like because he gets stuck. He gets stuck with the younger brother and his friends, and going to the water park, and then going to the Ziggy Piggy and the bowling alley. Yep. And I remember it's one of the few movies. Well, I mean, I used to watch R-rated movies all the time, no matter what age I was. But like thinking of the fact that like when he's like shit at the bowling alley, it's just like it's just that whole moment of like we always do, you know, when especially being 10 years old when I first saw it, I was like, they just shit like 16 times.
Well, because it's since it's subtitled, they put it up on screen, so it's just like you know exactly. They could have not put it in subtitles. It could have just been saying it in French.
The movie's a lot of fun. I've watched it with my kids. I watched Back to the Future, the first one, and Bill and Ted, the first one.
Awesome. Your kids
yeah. Awesome. Chris actually just recently asked if we could watch Bill and Ted again sometime soon. But it's one of those things to me that's funny because of the fact that like they, both of these, you could have done a one shot and just been the first movie, and I would have been totally okay with that.
I agree.
As there are a lot on this list that fall into that category, so.
Next up on that list is one that falls into that category, kind of. Well, and actually both of these are on the list. We've got one at number 4 and one at number 8. We got the Terminator franchise. The first 2 Terminator films literally should have stopped after 2 because as good of a movie as the first one is, I still personally believe the second one's far superior.
It's kind of like Alien and Aliens, right?
100%.
Except these are both made by James Cameron. So the first one's a horror movie. The second one's an action film for the most part, even though there is a lot of exposition. But the action sequences are like way, way, way more extreme stuff going on. What I really like about the first one is, I mean, obviously he had a low budget, so he had to make and what's the best thing to do with a low budget film is make horror movies for the most part. Sure. So time and time again, the cinematic world has shown us that you make a good horror movie for a little bit of money and you can get whatever you want for the sequel most of the time.
That is correct.
So you got Terminator and this whole aspect of this kid being somebody who is going to eventually become the leader of the resistance against all the bad computers in the world, and to kill him. It's kind of like the whole like scenario of if time travel were possible, do you go back and kill Hitler as a child? Which, right, was the basis for one of our films.
That is correct. One that you wrote.
To Change the World, which we made when we were doing film. but yeah, like, so you have this whole aspect of what's worse, kill him now or kill him back then before he caused any problems.
Sure.
So yeah, they send Terminator, the T-800. Actually, I don't even think was he the T-800 in the first movie? I think he had a different name.
No, he was a T-800 in the first movie.
I think it might be a different number. I think so, okay. But I'm not 100%. So yeah, they send Arnold Schwarzenegger back in time to kill John Connor's mom before she's even pregnant.
Correct.
The really weird thing about this series, and I'm okay with it but it depends on how you feel about it when you're watching it. Time is constant, but time is also relative. It's both of them at the same time, because like you have the constant of the fact that John Connor is
Kyle Reese's son.
Reese's son, but like it's that whole paradox of like,
yep.
What if he never went back? Like, what if he died at some other point in time? Does she get pregnant by somebody else? Still name him John.
That's the point of constant time, is no matter what, he was always sent back. But you're right. It's one of those great paradoxes, is which one came first. Like, John Connor always sent him back to become his father. But here's the other thing. This is a double paradox that's going on, because at the end of the movie, when Cyberdyne gets a hold of the leftover pieces of the Terminator that become important in the second movie, that helps them create Skynet. So if they never found those original pieces of the T-800, I'm still pretty sure it's the T-800 in that movie. If they never
look that up while we're talking about this.
If they never found those pieces, then they would never have been able to create Skynet to be able to create the Terminators to be able to send him back in the first place. So we have kind of a double paradox, constant loop going on right there.
One of the things that the first two movies are really good movies. All the other ones are pretty crappy. I think the one I like the most after the first two is personally, I think it was Genesis. Yeah, I liked aspects of Genesis.
I don't remember which one Genesis was. Was that the one with Game of Thrones girl?
It was, okay. And that's the one where John Connor comes back, and he is a Terminator.
And he is a Terminator, yeah, because somebody sent Grandpa back to protect Sarah all the way back in 1984, which I did enjoy that sequence when they reshot the original arrival of the Terminator, and it's got like the three punks again, and then Grandpa shows up then.
Yeah, but for the most part, it's just, and like I said, if I had to pick one, it's probably that one. I really enjoyed the Sarah Connor Chronicles, the Terminator series that they did on Fox for a couple of seasons. There's a couple of things that don't make sense from a writing standpoint, but one of the things that I thought was really cool was one. So in the third Terminator movie, they killed off Sarah Connor and said she had cancer.
Yeah.
So in the television show, right after the stuff that happened in 1994 in T2, not too long after that, they end up time traveling from that point in time to the future and jump, and then find out that Sarah Connor would have ended up dying of cancer, so then she could start getting treatment and survive that. And then the other thing that I thought was kind of cool was, so that way you kind of get around it with like a J.J. Abrams Star Trek kind of thing. But the other cool aspect was Skynet was like super planning. And what I mean by that was, like, yes, he sent back Terminators to try and kill John Connor, but he also sent Terminators back to like put them in strategic places so that when Judgment Day happened, that they would already have control of certain things. So like one of the episodes shows that like John Connor's character go into a bunker, which is supposed to be a bunker for like if a nuclear fallout happens. And when he gets there, there is a Terminator, and he's standing there. He's powered down, but he's just standing in the middle of this room.
Like, and is it just literally an exoskeleton, or is it like, does it look like Arnold Schwarzenegger?
It looks like whoever the T-800 version was for the TV show.
The TV show, okay.
But yeah, he's just standing in the room, and he's just powered down, but his eyes are open. And he's just perfectly standing still. And so, like, he's literally there so that when Judgment Day happens, he has control over this nuclear facility, like nuclear fallout facility, to like close it up, and it has tons of ammunition for the armed forces so that they can use those weapons themselves. So like I just thought it was a really cool different version and thought process on it. I thought it was really cool. So
gotcha. To address the T-800 pieces getting into Cyberdyne, that is a time travel paradox that is known as the bootstrap paradox, which involves an item from the future becoming trapped in the past and thus becoming its creator. Like, because it's trapped in the past, it leads to the creation of itself in the future, and then it's the chicken and the egg thing about never knowing which one came first.
Dang it.
What's up?
I just can't find the T-800 if it had a different name in the first one. Cyberdyne Systems Model 101.
Look up. I think there's a Wikipedia page for like the Terminator or something like that, and it gives you the ID verifications for variations for every movie.
Cyberdyne Systems Model 101. The Cyberdyne System Model 101 living tissue skin was based upon. Yeah. So
when was T-800 introduced?
That's what they call it in the second movie. So the Terminator, also known as Cyberdyne Systems Model 101 or the T-800. And it talks about how there are multiple...
So is 101 and 800 the same model?
Almost, yeah. I would imagine that what is the difference between them? Okay, in the first Terminator film, he was mostly called 101, and the model number T-800 was introduced in Terminator 2, but they are actually the same, and without one or the other wouldn't be possible. T-800 is the endoskeleton, and 101 is the skin, and therefore the physical appearance of the model. That's right. Okay.
That makes sense. That's cool.
I was like, I remember them calling him something else in that first one. So
okay, well,
sorry to go on that rant, and that took us down a rabbit hole. So.
I'm glad you answered that question.
But
go ahead.
The series, like, if you just watch the first two and the television series, you don't need to watch anything else.
It's probably the most muddled of all time travel properties there is. Like,
and so many different studios owned them too. Right. Like at one point it was Paramount, and one point it was Warner Brothers. One point it's Corelco Films,
I think did the first one,
which is not. I think they did the first two, maybe.
The first two, yeah.
So, or maybe the first one was Canon or Orion, and the second one was Corelco. I can't remember.
Orion was the first one.
But whatever the case, right? Like, it's just because of the fact that there were people just kept going. Well, people will pay to watch Terminator, so let's just slap Terminator on it, and it doesn't matter what it is, if it's good or not.
Yep.
So, one of the problems with making successful movies.
But the second one, as we've said, is really good. That shifts the present to 1995. Again, a Terminator from the year 2029. Hold on, what's the year? Oh, it's 2029 in both of them. So this time from 2029 is set back to 1995. This is where we kind of get some weirdness with John Connor, because when the police when the T-1000 runs his thing in the cop car, it lists his birthday as February 28th of 1985, which would then make him 10 years old in that movie. And
what's he supposed to be?
Is he like I always thought he was like 13 or 14. Like I always thought he was more of a teenager than he just didn't seem to be a 10-year-old kid to me in that movie.
Yeah, but he's wise beyond his years essentially, because he had to be with his mom. So
I guess so. But yeah, so that's as we talked about before, that movie probably has the worst trailer of any movie that's ever been released, because they completely gave away the fact that the T-800 was there to protect him in the trailer. And honestly, that first 45 minutes of that movie would work out so well for somebody who didn't know that. The first 45 minutes, you would think that Robert Patrick is there to protect him again from the Terminator. So, like, that whole arcade scene would play out differently, where you're like, oh, he's trying to protect him. Excuse me. And then all of a sudden, like, the get down line would happen, and you would be like, wait, what? And it would just play out so much better if they didn't show that scene in the trailer. Granted,
there's so many movies that do that, though, right? Like, these great twists in film that they decide they're gonna. It's like, are you gonna show us the ending of The Sixth Sense while we're watching a trailer? Like,
Well, then
and
again,
and you think of
that ruined the movie Snake Eyes for me because at the beginning of the movie of Snake Eyes, it's like Gary Sinise and Nicolas Cage are best friends, and then in the trailer it shows Gary Sinise holding a gun to Nicolas Cage's head, and you're like,
oh wow, yeah,
yeah,
like or what was the one of the other ones was Ransom, that the
okay,
movie with Mel Gibson.
yep,
Like the trailer, like if you would have known that his son was taken and he'd do almost anything for him, and then he does that whole flip where he gets on TV and he's like, I'm putting this bounty on your head.
yep,
Like if you wouldn't have known that going into that movie and then you would have seen that, you would have been like, oh shit.
yeah,
Like I did not see that coming,
yep.
and that really, like, that would have been super cool. But they got to put stupid stuff in trailers because when they do all these test showings and all this other crap,
Sure.
people want to know what they're going to go see before they even go see it, which is so stupid.
I agree with you. It's stupid. It sucks that psychological tests have proven that's the way to get through to people. Like,
Well,
it's
and
disappointing.
that's the reason why we watch the same movies over and over again. Apparently, that and TV shows, because you know what's coming. You don't have to worry about it and not be on the edge of your seat or
You're
anything.
not apprehensive or having anxiety because you know what's coming next. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I literally watch multiple episodes of Friends every single day. Like it's on TNT or TBS or something, and I put it on, or I turn on my HBO Max and run a few episodes every day, just because I like having it on for background stuff when I'm doing other things. So yeah, Terminator 1 and 2, great. And then the only thing that the later movies, the only thing that the third movie kind of did okay was the time travel concept of, well, the timeline concept of no matter what, you can't avoid certain things. Like there's fixed points in time. Like Judgment Day is going to happen no matter what. That's the only good thing that came out of the third movie was the fact that Yep.
I was going to say, and you're a fan of Doctor Who, and fixed points are a big thing in Doctor Who. So.
Yep. So, the next one we've got's a pretty big one, very popular recent movie. Avengers Endgame turned into Avengers Time Heist. And I'm not upset about that. It's pretty cool what they ended up doing. We don't actually know the official year for the movie, but since it came out in 2019, most Marvel movies seem to be pretty current when they come out.
I want to say it's supposed to take place in 2022 or 2023.
Well, but so the 5-year jump ahead would be 2024.
No, that's what I mean. It's like I think the jump ahead was 24.
Okay.
Okay, so that would make sense.
So like 2024 should be, well, after the first 10 minutes of the movie, the jump ahead, the 5 years should be like 2024-ish, hypothetically, maybe 2023. So at that point, after Ant-Man comes out of the quantum realm, they come up with the
stupidest plot device ever.
So stupid, man. And David Desmalchian, who was like the Russian hacker guy, he actually went on Twitter or something and made a rant about the fact that he was like, I can't believe that they had a mouse get Scott Lang out of the quantum realm when my character easily could have been hunting down that van for 5 years, finally found it, and finally was able to pull him out. You would have had to pay me to work for 1 day. He was like, I would have done a much better job of just a mouse, running over a button. And when I saw that, I was like, that dude has a 1,000% correct, like, why they didn't do that, where he's just like, he meets with the security guard, and he's just like, I'm looking for this van. I think I need to get this van. It's here. They go, they find it. He's like, cool, like, I need this van. He's a hacker. He can do whatever he needs to make it official that he can take that van. He takes that van back to his hideout, pushes some buttons, out pops Scott Lang. Like, so much better than a mouse after 5 years running over
just
it.
Accidentally stepping on something.
That was so lame. So after he comes out and admits it only felt like 5 minutes to me, which good for him, I guess. They come up with the time heist plot. They fill him in on Thanos. They decide to build a time machine out of the quantum realm and Banner's technology. And then we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different time periods that we travel to. Well, I mean, not necessarily, but a couple of the guys travel back to 2012. Bruce Banner goes back to 2012 to visit the Sanctum Sanctorum. While in 2012, Steve, Tony, and Scott go to the end of the Battle of New York. While Loki's being escorted away, they attempt to steal the Tesseract and they fail, which is setting up the Loki TV series, which hopefully is pretty cool.
It's America's ass.
we have the Cap v Cap fight scene, which was pretty cool. Then when they fail, they have Tony and Steve decide they have to travel back to 1970 because they know for a fact the the Space Stone was at Shield headquarters in 1970. That's kind of cool, very Back to the Future-ish, because we get Tony getting to see his dad and like starting to, now that Tony's
finally getting that closure.
Yeah, now that Tony's gone through everything that he has with the Avengers and like how important that is to him in his life right now and how like dedicated he is to being an Avenger, he kind of has a better understanding of why his father wasn't around as much when he was growing up and like why his father had like all these secrets and all these other things going on in his life and couldn't give young Tony the attention that he wanted. So they get a really awesome, and I love the dude that plays Tony's dad. I can't think of the actor's name, but the guy that plays Tony's dad is awesome.
Yeah, he was on Mad Men. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but their scenes, they're like two scenes they have together in 1970 are really awesome. Jason's getting his name.
There's so many people in Endgame. John Slattery.
John Slattery, yeah, that guy, awesome. The couple of other times in the earlier films where he played Howard Stark were I always liked his presence and bravado he brought to the character. So that's a couple of people going to 2012 and then 1970. We have a group that goes to 2013. Thor and Rocket travel to Asgard in 2013. Rhodey and Nebula travel to Morag in 2014 to steal. I don't even remember which stone they're stealing the stone before Peter Quill gets a chance to steal it. Power Stone. But then at the same time, since they're going back and stealing it before him, then literally the events of the Guardians of the Galaxy movie should have never actually happened.
Well, no, but Cap goes back to the exact same point.
That's right. Yeah.
Drops it back.
Oh, man, this is timey-wimey stuff. So then 2014, Vormir... Oh, and now that you bring that up, what was her name? The bald High Priestess chick.
The ancient one.
The ancient one. She has her whole discussion with Banner about how like they shouldn't be doing this, and Banner promises her, "No, we'll take them all back." I had completely forgotten about that. So yeah, Cap fixes all this. So and then in 2014, Black Widow and Hawkeye travel back to 2014 to go to Vormir, and that was a pretty intense sequence there. So we have a lot of time heists going on all at once, and I think they pulled it off really well. And then, on top of that, we get another version of Fish Out of Water, because bad 2014 Nebula ends up switching places with good 2024 Nebula, goes back to the future to 2024, and opens up a portal for 2014 Thanos to just jump ahead and skip the entire events of Infinity War to start another war. And so then we've got 2014 Thanos starting another war in 2024, and then we get our huge big like fight. So there's a lot of time travel going on in this movie. I feel like they pulled it off pretty well. I enjoyed the whole story. I like how it all came together. You know, when you want to keep a character like Thanos around after you've killed him, you just grab an older version of him and teleport him to the future. So our next movie is also another comic book time travel movie. It's one that I just watched yesterday because I realized I hadn't seen it since I watched it in the theater. I didn't really remember liking it that much, and I'm really not sure why. What? Are you following me now?
Oh, yeah. I just totally was not. I was trying to figure out what movie you were talking about. But
oh, gotcha.
I got
X-Men Days of Future Past. I think maybe I liked it a little more this time and was more open to the movie my second viewing because I've had to sit through Apocalypse and the other crap that came after it. But I remember when you and I watched it in the theater, I was really disappointed. I don't know what I wanted more from it. Like, I loved Blink both times that I watched it. She's still my favorite part of that entire movie.
Entire movie, the best part is the future, where like that all the fights that happen in the future are the best parts of that entire film.
So in a near distance, something like 2023-ish, I think when he wakes up at the end of the movie, they say it's 2023. So I don't know how far into the dystopian future it originally was. I'm not sure. But yeah, like all the stuff in the future, the opening sequence with the Sentinels breaking in, really awesome. Like I said, Blink is my favorite part. I absolutely love all of her throwing things and getting people to jump different ways to attack them. Really enjoy her. Sad I have to watch her die twice. That really is the worst part of that entire movie for me. Um, but sending Hugh Jackman or Wolverine's consciousness back to 1973 kind of
Makes
showed.
no sense.
Well, it's time travel. It's mutants. Like, it's not a legit time travel movie since his body doesn't actually travel back, but his consciousness travels back. So it's still kind of a fish out of water, even though he's traveling back into his old body. I had forgotten about the point in the movie when they're in the White House and he snaps back to the future. So then his 1973 version of himself is like, what am I doing here? Who are you people? And like has no memory of how he got there. I thought that was pretty well done. Obviously, they send him back again, and it works out and everything. But
I love how Kitty Pryde's phasing ability makes her push people back through time.
Sure,
makes perfect sense.
In the comic books, didn't they end up giving her a bunch of really bizarre powers at some point?
That was years and years later.
Okay.
In the comics, holy moly. Is it her who gets thrown back in time? I think it's her who goes back in time.
Like in the original Days of Future Past comic series?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that sounds right. I know the cover of the main issue is her and Wolverine with all the wanted posters behind them.
Oh, it's been so long since I read it, and my brain has had so much comic book saturation.
So we get to see 1973, the breaking Magneto out of wherever he was being held in prison at was pretty cool.
The Pentagon.
The Pentagon. I was much more open to Quicksilver this time. I think, let's see, that was 2014. So that was around the time the Quicksilver was introduced also in the MCU, right? Like, wasn't that around Age of Ultron, like 2014? 15 maybe?
Age of Ultron, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So I think I was probably just leaning more towards like the MCU version of him. This time it didn't really upset me or bother me in any way. I liked how they kind of tried to hint that Magneto was his dad. When he meets him, he talks about how his mom used to know somebody who could manipulate metal. What's up?
We were right. Okay. It was Kitty Pryde who travels. And it's essentially just the exact same thing. Her current mind, she transfers her mind into her younger self.
So, I mean, at least she had that ability. They used that for the movie, but I mean, let's be honest, everybody wants to see Hugh Jackman in the movie. So it makes sense from an executive standpoint why they picked Wolverine to be the one to go back instead of her.
Well, yeah, because I mean he was the X-Men franchise, so
yeah, for sure, and it kind of just makes sense for even at near the beginning of the movie, Charles is talking about how he wants to be the one to go back. And then Kitty Pryde's like, I don't think your mind can handle me sending you that far back. Like, you could probably handle, like, a month or two, but I don't think you could handle that. And then, like, Hugh Jackman steps up and he's like, what if you could send somebody whose mind could immediately heal? And you're like,
makes no sense.
Yeah, it's a comic book time travel movie.
It's the speed of plot, but whatever.
So, it is what it is. Like I said, my second view, I remember when we watched it, I was disappointed. Watching it yesterday, I kind of enjoyed it. I thought it was fine. Like, I don't love it in any way, except for the future stuff, because both of those big battle sequences at the beginning and the end are a lot of fun.
Which sucks, right? Because, like, if you think about the entire X-Men timeline, like, X2's the pinnacle. Like, sure. That's the top of the mountain. Then after that is probably, oh, man, like, I'd probably say the first X-Men for me.
Yep.
Followed by Logan, then probably Days of Future Past, and then the rest of them are, I mean, then maybe Wolverine. Oh, well, if you're including Deadpool, damn it, now I have to think of that whole. But yeah, so.
But yeah,
Whatever.
I
I
give
agree
them.
with you.
Go
The
ahead.
first time I saw it, I was disappointed. There's a lot of things that are just kind of blah, especially near the ending of the movie. Like I definitely like. I definitely like more of the first 2/3 than the last third.
Okay.
But the but
I remember the first time we watched it, I was really bothered, and I only like watching it yesterday. I don't even understand why, but I was bothered by Magneto like picking up the stadium and then like flying with it and then dropping it like to make a wall around like where he was attacking. Like I remember like the first time we watched it, I was like, that was really dumb. I don't understand it. It was stupid that he did that. It didn't bother me as much yesterday. I was like, oh okay, like he's using it to build a literal wall around so that nobody can escape. So didn't bother me as much that time. I also don't completely understand how he can manipulate metal, but he then also is able to give verbal commands to the Sentinels that are supposed to kill mutants. That
because he essentially reprogrammed them by putting metal in their brain.
Is that what it was? I missed that part.
Sure.
So yeah, Days of Future Past, better than I remember it. I understand why it got so many votes, especially since a lot of our friends are super nerds. So it makes a lot of sense to me. Moving on to another super nerdy movie, and I meant to watch this one today, and I lost track of time. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. You shaking your head?
I hate the I hate the fact that people are right about this movie.
What's that?
Well, no, like so many. Like I remember thinking, I was like a whale movie when I was a kid watching it. I was like, this is stupid.
Yep.
This is not Star Trek.
Yep.
It's literally a movie about whales.
Yep.
And save the earth and environment. Blah blah blah. I hear enough of this at school, kind of thing. And then like. I think I was working at Castleton Arts and everybody was like, that movie's great. And I was like, it's not great. It sucks. And then I went back and watched it and like it a lot more now than I did then.
For sure.
And I'm sad about that. Like, because it's still just a movie about whales for the most part.
You're not wrong in any way.
And how whales can say, like, the dumbest aspect of the whole thing is like the whale song is what keeps these intergalactic whales from killing the entire planet.
Yep.
It's really, really stupid.
Yep.
But like them being fish out of water and doing the things that they do in the past.
Yep.
And another one of those movies that's just like kind of like Superman 2. Like why, or is it no? It was Superman 1. Why is it that just because they fly around the sun, that turns back time?
Yep.
Kind of like Superman 1. Let's just fly in the opposite direction.
Yep.
And physics doesn't apply here whatsoever. Nope. But yeah, like just that moment of like, what the fuck were they thinking?
Sure.
When they wrote this script.
So I'm gonna pitch to you why an executive at Paramount made this movie the way it was. This happens more in television than I do think it happens in movies, but it obviously happens in movies. You just made 3 Star Trek films. I don't know the profitability of those first 3 movies, but when you're talking about making a 4th one, a huge way to cut your production costs on a sci-fi project like that is to make it travel back in time to the present day.
Current time.
The movie was set in 1986. The movie was released in 1986. So you literally remove a lot of your special effects budgets. They used the Bird of Prey instead of the Enterprise, so they didn't have to build any more like Enterprise. I mean, I guess at the very end of the movie, we got the shot of the Enterprise 1701A. But like the majority of the movie, you don't have to do any special effects because it's all modern. It's all everything that was already in 1986. Cuts your special effects budget down. Your building sets budget down. I guarantee that Star Trek 4, and I should have looked this up before right now, I guarantee that was the cheapest of every Star Trek film that has ever been made.
Probably right.
Well, but then again, and this didn't make the list. I think it gets mentioned in the honorable mentions because you brought up First Contact, which
so awesome.
Which is a great movie, and I forgot to put it on the original voting list. But same thing applies to that. It was released in 1995 or whatever year that was, and that was the year that was set for First Contact to happen. So more than half of that movie is set like in modern day for them at that point. So
Yeah.
again, saves a lot of production value or like production costs by not having to build sets. You literally go film outside in the woods somewhere.
It's why the Terminator took place in 1984, probably for the
Yep.
most majority of the movie. So
Um. So yeah, I'm kind of the same way. For whatever reason, I don't understand why. This was the probably when I was younger, the Star Trek movie I watched the most amount of times, and I don't really know why or understand it. Like I would have been 6 when it came out, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know. 2 and 3 I didn't watch very much. 3 kind of scared me because of the fact that I knew it was Christopher Lloyd as the bad guy, but I couldn't picture Doc Brown being a bad guy. So that's also why like Who Framed Roger Rabbit bothers me a lot or bothered me a lot when I was a kid. Um,
yeah, I think you did a Freudian slip there. I think it still bothers you still.
it
So
might still bother me a little bit.
I think 2 and 4 are probably the ones that were watched the most in my house.
Right on.
So
But yeah, we'll see. And again, like I was probably 6 to 8 when I saw Khan for the first time, and when they put those bugs in their ears, like that
oh,
still like gives me the creepies. Like, ugh, I did not enjoy that scene at all. Ugh. All right, so after that, well, and that's in the notes. One of the weird things about this movie is it's one of the very few times in a time travel movie they travel back to 1986, and their main contact in the present day decides to go to the future with them because of the dolphins, or yeah, the whales, because of the humpback
Wales.
whales. Uh, so you've got literally like their fish out of waters for most of the movie, and then she literally becomes the fish out of the water by traveling to the future and just deciding to go with them. Like, I'm going to jump 800 years and see what the world's like then. So, not something that happens very often in time travel movies. It's usually always about getting everybody back to where they're supposed to be. The next one of my all-time favorite, in my top 20 all-time favorite films, 12 Monkeys, the Terry Gilliam film. Bruce Willis and Brad Pitt are absolutely phenomenal. This was like the height of my crush for Brad Pitt in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. Um, we have Cole in the future in 2035, who is basically in prison-ish, some type of holding cell. Some scientists slash doctors give him a mission to go back to 1996 to try to figure out where this virus came from that basically made it impossible for people to live up on the surface of the world. They're all living underground now and stuff. First time they try to, and I enjoy the fact that this is like the only time travel movie I know of that addresses the fact that like time travel's not a exact science. Like they screw up. The first time they send him back, they send him to 1990 by accident. Like they were aiming for 1996, and for whatever reason, he ended up in 1990. Meets Madeline Stowe. She thinks he's crazy, puts him in an insane asylum. He meets Brad Pitt, and then just all of a sudden he's gone. He's back in the future. And also, like I want to think that this is Hitchcockian, that they never actually show us the time travel. Like we never see if it's a machine that he goes in. We never see if they electrocute him. Like we never like as a viewer, we literally just see him in the future, and then all of a sudden he's in the past.
Yeah.
So they send him back to 1990 the first time. He comes back to the future, and he's like, "You guys screwed up. Like I went to 1990. I wasn't in the right place." So they were like, "All right, well, we're gonna send you back again." This time they send him back to World War One or Two, World War One, where he ends up getting shot in the leg, and then his photograph gets taken, which speed of plot there, like why there was somebody who was there at that moment to take that photo, nobody will ever know, except for the fact that it comes into play when he does end up in 1996. So he ends up in 1996 2 different times. The first time, everybody thinks that I guess he is kind of a bad guy. He does kidnap Madeline Stowe in that one to try to convince her that he's a time traveler because she was his doctor in 1990. And then he gets sent back to the future again, where he's like, "Hey, you guys pulled me back too soon. I'm on the right path of like trying to figure this out." So while he's back in the future, Madeline Stowe sees the picture of him in World War One, where he looks the exact same as she's always known him. So then she's like, oh my god, he really is a time traveler. Then he comes back to 1996. They, get romantic because that's how things go at that point. Yeah. And then this film at the end, throughout the whole film, James Cole is plagued by seeing this guy get shot when he was a child. He just remembers being in an airport and seeing a guy get shot and killed. It comes full circle at the end of the movie where you find out he's always witnessed his own murder. So it's a time is constant.
It's really a murder. It's more of a death because they have justification to shoot him.
Okay, ish. So. Yeah, I mean, yeah, kind of. From a certain point of view.
They definitely have every reason to shoot. He's got a gun.
Yeah.
He's kidnapped Madeline Stowe.
Yeah.
He's trying to kill somebody else. Okay. Totally, he just doesn't succeed.
Sure.
And that's all right. But yeah, they're totally justified in shooting him.
Yeah. So that's cool because of the fact that a lot of this movie makes you assume that it's a time is relative movie. Like he's trying to go back and change things. He's leaving voicemails. But then there at the end you realize that he's always been on this path in his future self to come back to where young version of him sees himself getting killed.
Which means that the virus never gets fixed.
Correct. And then, I wouldn't call it a Shyamalan ending, but the ending when the guy that actually releases the virus sits down next to the Indian woman, and we've seen her in the future as one of the scientist doctor people that's trying to stop this and sending Cole back, and you're like, lady, you were sitting right next to the guy that released this whole virus on everybody. So very good storytelling in my opinion. I absolutely love the film. I won't say it doesn't have faults. There's obviously some time traveling issues that come up in the plot, but typical time travel storyline, we just kind of brush them aside. And for whatever reason, I forgive a lot of those issues with this movie. So, the next movie's a comedy. I watched it a couple of days ago because I needed to have it refreshed in my mind, because in 2005 I remembered hating it, and apparently you'd never seen it until recently. And
last week.
Last week, and do you hate it?
I wouldn't say hate it. One of my favorite. So we're talking about Idiocracy.
Yeah, thank you.
And so here in the whole point of the movie is Clive Owen. No, Owen. No, it's not Clive Owen. It's the other Owen.
Luke Wilson.
Luke Wilson, thank you. I kept thinking of Owen Wilson. My fault.
No,
so Luke Wilson is an average, everyday person who has no ambition whatsoever, has no family whatsoever. And he works for the federal government. So the federal government decides to put him to sleep for a year. They accidentally make him go to bed for, 500 years, isn't it?
500 years, yep.
Okay.
Well,
so then he wakes up.
Because the guy who was in charge of this project ends up getting busted for a prostitution ring at the army base that this happens at.
Yeah.
So they tear everything down, and nobody knew that the two of them were asleep in their cryopods.
So it's him and a hooker that are asleep for 500 years. They go to the future. They're trying to find a way to the past, and all these ridiculous, stupid things happen. And this is done by Mike Judge, who is Beavis and Butthead creator, did Office Space.
Yep.
So the whole point of this movie is that stupid people reproduce at a much faster rate than smart people do.
Mm-hmm.
And so by the time he gets thawed out 500 years in the future, he is the smartest man alive. And he's just an average IQ for today's standards.
Yeah.
So I was explaining this to my son, Christopher, who's only 9 years old. And I'm going through and telling him the basic plot line of the whole movie. And he's cracking up and he's laughing about it while I'm explaining it to him. Which is funny because every time I've had this explained to me, I always went, I need to watch this movie because it sounds so much better than the execution actually is. It sounds hilarious. It sounds like a great fish out of water story.
Yep.
I was telling him about how everybody drinks Gatorade and everybody uses or Gatorade knockoff and uses Gatorade to feed everything on planet Earth.
Yep.
But because they're too stupid to know that it's not good for everything. And so I'm telling Chris, a 9-year-old, and he's cracking up, and he's like, "I want to watch this movie," and I'm like, "Yeah, you're a little bit too young for this one still." But yeah, it's one of those movies where Terry Crews is in it, and I mean, he's playing Terry Crews, like the man doesn't act; he just does his thing, and that's President fine. Camacho. And but yeah, this I like the story plot synopsis way better than I like the movie.
Yeah, the other thing about watching this movie, like I hadn't seen it since 2005, watched it, at whatever theater I was at that point. And I remember not liking it, but for this episode, I was like, 15 years later, maybe I'll like it more than I did back then. The thing that surprised me the most was the dialogue they were allowed to get away with in 2005. The word fag is used multiple times in that movie.
Gay.
They call things super gay. Like things that just would not fly in today's society, wouldn't get made in today's society. Which, I mean, Mike Judge has always kind of been that way. Like, he's always kind of pushed things. But
I mean, you might get away with this kind of stuff now. I think you're right. It's probably a little bit more risque, but I mean, like, for somebody like Mike Judge, he probably can get away with it even now, just because of the people that his following. Like, you think of Ted, and Ted 2, and like just him, and that was Seth MacFarlane, right? Yep. Yep. But I mean, still, it's like kind of the same toilet humor kind of stuff going on. You might get away with it. It definitely had more of it than I would think. I think you're right. I think it's definitely more than you would get away with most of the time now. Yeah. But I think Mike Judge might be able to push that envelope a little.
Well, I know like the phrase retarded offends a lot of people. They definitely use that a lot of times, and like talking about, oh, he's retarded. Oh, this guy's retarded. Like, don't listen to him. He's retarded. And I'm just like, man, like, that's a phrase that doesn't go over well in 2021. So, another controversy started by Idiocracy relates to another movie that you suggested in the polls, which was Encino Man, which is a debate of whether you can actually consider them time travel movies. I do, because I feel that it is definitely a fish out of water scenario where you have a character, your main character essentially, who is being pushed into a different time period. Luke Wilson's character goes 500 years into the future. He's the fish out of water. Like, this isn't his time period. Like, Demolition Man, in my opinion, kind of falls into that. Like, and again, like, I don't consider Demolition Man a time travel movie, but he definitely is the fish out of water in a different time period from where he started at the beginning of the movie. So,
that should have been on this list. I guarantee you that would have been in the top 10.
Probably. But again, like, that's the only time travel. Well, and I mean, I guess him and Simon Phoenix are both frozen for, like 70 years or whatever it turns out to be. And so they're both fish out of waters in a different time period, but it's really weird that I don't consider that a time travel movie, yet it's the same plot device as Encino Man.
And Idiocracy, yeah.
Yeah, Ice Age gets frozen and gets thawed out in, present day, what was that, 1992, I think? 91, 92, somewhere around there. So it's weird. I do consider Encino Man time travel. What's up?
He's in the juice.
He's in the juice. No, he's in the juice. No, he's in the juice.
He's in the juice.
But yeah, so I love Encino Man. I do consider it a time travel movie. I see Link as traveling to the future and having to adjust to it. I guess it's another one that does not ever deal with like having to get him back to his time period. So it's just him adjusting to modern day. Another suggestion that you made was Donnie Darko, a movie that I do really like. I'm not 100. I understand that the common knowledge theme for the movie is that it's a time travel movie and the bomb dropping is the catalyst for all of it. But when I watched Donnie Darko,
not a bomb.
Not a bomb? I thought it was a bomb.
No, it's a jet engine.
Oh, I apologize. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, the jet engine that falls through the roof. Yeah.
Yeah, he's seeing his own time tunnel, essentially.
Yeah.
That's what the whole plot is he's seeing his own time tunnel. And it's one of those things to me, like, I love this movie. If nobody's ever seen it, take the time.
Oh yeah.
Jake Gyllenhaal plays a character who's very much an outcast
Yep.
for his high school. Him and Maggie Gyllenhaal are both in it. She plays a sister, like, real life. Jenna Malone is in it. I absolutely adore her. I think she's awesome. I think she's great in this movie too. And it's just got some really weird and dark stuff going on in it. Don't watch the director's cut; it's crap. Watch the theatrical cut; so much better. Patrick Swayze's in it. Noah Wile's in it. But yeah, so like the whole plot is he is seeing all these weird things, and it's not making sense to him, and he's trying to figure it out, but he's having a really difficult time doing it while trying to work his way through the social craziness that is high school. And but yeah, so essentially the whole plot device at the end is the fact that he can see his own timeline essentially, and he decides to do something at the end that I don't see coming.
Sure.
And I think that it's a fun, well, not fun. It's a dark and twisted adventure through time, and I think, but it's still mostly chronological. So,
yep.
But yeah, I heavily recommend Donnie Darko. The movie freaks me out.
It's a very enjoyable, trippy ride. That I can understand how it could be classified as time travel, even though pretty much the majority of the movie is told in order.
Not only that, but like the guy who wrote and directed it, man, like he made like I said, the director's cut's not good. I really don't care for the director's cut, but then he went on and made Southland Tales, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense at all.
Not really.
But yeah, like I wish that guy would like have some kind of normalcy so that he could make more movies, but whatever.
The other one that you had added to the list is one that I didn't really like, but I definitely understand the ultimate time travel aspect of it, was Interstellar. Obviously,
I don't care for the movie.
It's obviously a time loop, because all of the things that are happening at the beginning of the movie, you find out at the end of the movie, were caused by the main character before he knew that he was doing them. But then it's also like, because he eventually travels back in time and sets himself on this path, he thus creates a time loop that goes back to that, like, there's the chicken or the egg. Like, was there ever a point where he didn't tell himself the clues to get to where he ends up getting to? Like,
I find it interesting. What the only thing that I liked about Interstellar was the aspects of when people go on a planet, that time changes.
Yes.
Time happens differently on a planet thanks to the gravitational pull and due to rotation and stuff like that, compared to somebody who is just in space, above the planet.
The first time that happens, when they go down to that water planet or whatever, and then they come back, and the black dude is like super years. Aged, and they're like, "What's going on? We were only gone for like 2 hours," and he was like, "It was 2 hours for you, but I've been waiting for you for 40 years." I was like, oh my god, like, that dude was by himself on a spaceship for 40 years. Like, that's a whole story in itself right there. Like, what did he do for 40 years by himself?
Yeah.
So, like,
and it shocks me that you don't like this movie more because of the fact that it's Christopher Nolan and it plays with time so much. But, sometimes you just miss the nail. So, like... And I like the aspects of it, and it's an interesting way to interpret time and space with relativity. But yeah, I did not care for the movie overall. So.
I think partially some of the things that turned me off to the movie was the beginning with, like, the sun glaring things that basically essentially becomes like what sets this whole story in motion. Like, when that happens, like, I don't know, like the first 15 minutes of the movie, I literally, like, just knew to myself, this is him, like sending a message back or whatever. Like this is him doing this. So like that surprise at the end wasn't there for me. But then like the whole last sequence with the like time manipulation alien thing that was going on, I just didn't dig it. I didn't buy it. Like it didn't pay
I don't
off.
even remember that.
What's that?
I don't even remember the ending. I remember
really?
him like showing up, and it was like after his daughter had died, and he was on like the Halo space station thing,
Right.
and like that's all I remember about the ending. I didn't even know
Yeah.
that he found a way to go back.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like, he doesn't like really go back. Like, he's essentially in like a fourth dimension where he's literally just like floating in space by himself and has the ability to pick where he wants to go in time. So he goes back to that moment at the beginning of the movie with his daughter and like the sun beams coming through the window or whatever it was. And I don't. It does suck because it is Christopher Nolan, and I was really hyped for it. I should probably watch it again because I've only ever watched it once because I was so disappointed in it. Like it's down there with Insomnia for me with Christopher Nolan. Like it's the lesser of the good that he's done in his film career for me.
Which I bought for only $2 digitally.
Oh.
So I need to. I've never seen Insomnia, so
it's okay, but it's not great. Obviously, you're going to be not surprised by this at all. It's based on a Swedish film.
So yeah, you told me.
A day or two before I went to the screening of it, I watched the Swedish film, which is so tense and like, I watched it with all the lights off in my room, like just so drawn into this super tense movie about a serial killer and a cop trying to catch him. And then I went and watched Robin Williams try to be a serial killer and just didn't buy it at all. So,
the only other one I'm going to throw out is To Change the World.
So, let's talk about your To Change the World movie, man. That
so
is
we
the
kind of
plot
hinted
of going
to
back
it.
and killing Hitler as a kid.
We hinted at it earlier. When did we make that one, Shane? That was 2001? 2003? Okay. So we made that in 2003. It's about a guy who has the ability to travel through time.
By thinking about
it. By just picking points in time and just thinking about it and going. It's not explained as to how he got the powers or anything like that, but and then it's his, it's kind of like what we were making fun of with Back to the Future 2, how you had like all these different versions of the neighborhood.
Yep.
All happen, that his house has always been his house. Whereas the things that change in this movie, his apartment's always been his apartment.
Yep.
Even though all sorts of people change relationship wise with him, you definitely it's a very interesting take. It was just what happens if, like, in the whole premise is what happens if you kill Hitler and things are way worse than they would have been with him in power and with him doing what the horrible things that he did.
Throw your pitch out there, man. Why does he want to go back and kill Hitler? What happened to him?
So I mean, like, the main part is his brother is the district attorney and is doing a big case against essentially a white nationalist neo-Nazi kind of movement or group of people in their city, and he's trying them and trying to get them put away big time and hitting them hard with the law to kind of swing his big D around and act like he's the man. But his brother ends up murdered, and so like here you had the main character who had constantly thought of different ways to use this to kind of like manipulate things for himself, and he was trying to figure out the best way to manipulate things for everybody, essentially. And so he goes through this whole period of like reflection of trying to figure out what he should do, and then he's like, wait a minute, if these assholes who are going to kill my brother are Nazis, then let's go back and kill the main movement of Nazism before it ever becomes a problem. So he goes back in time and he kills Hitler when Hitler's like 12, 13 years old, and then comes back to find out things aren't nearly as nice as he wanted them to be when he would come back. So
somebody took
luckily his brother
and was far worse.
And so you had his brothers alive, but like all sorts of relationships that he had um, in the original timeline. All sorts of relationships are different. There are people that existed in his previous time, or who had already passed away in his previous timeline, in his original timeline, that are still with us in his new timeline. And so he's kind of conflicted with all these different things that are going on around him and trying to figure out the best way to go about things. So, it's kind of weird because it's one of those movies that, like, kind of like, we didn't talk about it, but Looper, like, it's very much like, it's a blend. It's kind of like a blend of, like, of time is relative and time is constant. It's kind of like a blend of the two, kind of like Looper. So it's just it's a very weird 45-minute, 50-minute short. Hopefully in the next week or two, maybe I can get it up on our YouTube page on.
I hope so.
For Gemini
I would love
Films.
to get back to watching that. That's one of our. It's one of our projects that I haven't watched in a long time. Like, I can't lie, I'm sitting here going, I don't really remember the resolution of that movie.
So yeah, we just need to we were really good about keeping certain things. But apparently you and I handed out all of our copies of the DVD of this movie. So so now I have to go back to the source of it and rip it digitally, and hopefully, if I can do so, hopefully it'll look nice enough. So
sure. Not that I want to give any false hope, but I pulled 3 hard drives out of my attic this week. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get them to turn on. They're all old hard drives from when we used to do stuff 20 years ago. So I have no faith that they're actually going to turn on when I plug them in. But I pulled 3 hard drives out of my attic to see what I could get off of them. So I might have some fun stuff. Talk about a couple of the other movies that I have as my honorable mentions on here that we haven't talked about. I can't remember, and I hold true to this statement. The movie we're about to talk about is my all-time favorite time travel movie, superior to Back to the Future, superior to Bill and Ted. I'll explain why going on. But did you ever get to watch Primer?
Yeah, okay. I can see why you like it so much, but I didn't. It did not click for me on the level that it did for you. It's good. It's fine, and it explains time travel in a cool way, in very original way. But for the most part, I was kind of bored throughout the whole thing.
And I can understand that. So Primer was a 2004 film by Shane Carruth. It's only 77 minutes long, which is one of the best parts about it, because the first time I ever watched it, I immediately went back and watched it a second time. So it became like a 3-hour movie night for me because I watched the same movie back to back. Primer's general concept is, and again, this is a low-budget movie that was made for like $20,000 or something. Like, it was super on the cheap. Shane Carruth and his friends just basically made the movie. And it's a super intelligent time travel story because basically 2 guys they're basically like computer programmers that are trying to do like a garage business. Like, the big thing, like Apple and IBM all started in garages or whatnot. Like, they're trying to start up like a computer programming company in their garage. They accidentally stumble onto what it turns out to be a formula for time travel. But it's not like any other version of time travel you've ever seen. If you want to time travel back in time 1 hour, the time machine is essentially, well, originally it's a very small, like, shoebox size. They build a larger one that's basically the size of a deep freezer so that a human being can fit in it. You have to turn the machine on at a certain point. Like, if I turn the machine on at, like, midnight tonight, that is the farthest back I can travel in time. The machine has to be turned on to be able to travel back in time. So if I wait until noon and decide that I want to travel back to midnight, I have to get into the time machine, turn it on again, and then wait 12 hours because that's how long the machine had been on. So if I wanted to travel back in time 3 days, I'd have to turn the machine on, wait 3 days, get in the machine, wait 3 more days, and then I would come out, when I first turned the machine on. So it's a very awesome and unique concept about time travel because it's not like I can just jump in it and travel back to 1955 or anything. I literally have to turn the machine on to tell it, here's your starting point. However long I wait to get in it, I then have to wait that same amount of time to go backwards in time to come out when I turned the machine on. I think it is a brilliant concept for time travel, and it ends up creating a version of time travel that I've never seen before, because it creates multiple layers of time travel, because people are going back in time, and then like it essentially becomes a paradox box where they're turning on multiple machines and then going back shorter periods of time to get into other machines to go back longer periods of time, so that there are multiple copies of themselves in the actual timeline. And the reason it's so fun to watch a second time immediately after you've learned that shtick about the time travel movie is you're then realizing, oh, that's the third version of this character. Oh, that's the second version of this character, who at the same time is doing what his third version is doing. And it becomes a very manipulative story about how you, the first time you watched it, never realized you were watching multiple versions of the same person in the same timeline. It's very confusing the first time, because you're like, wait a minute, how is he there? I literally just saw him at that party, but now I see him at the garage. That doesn't make any sense to me. So watching it immediately a second time, when it's fresh in your head, you're like, I see all of these, jumping back moments to create like three versions of myself in the timeline. Again, it's very low budget. It's like Clerks. Like, if you can't get through Clerks, you're not going to be able to get through this. It's not cinematography great. It's a lot of shaky cam stuff because they were just holding the camera. It's VHS quality. Like, it's not sharp and resolute or anything like that. But it's literally my favorite time travel movie ever. They create a set of rules and they follow them throughout the thing, and I really respected that the first time I watched, the first, second, and multiple times that I've watched it. Another one that I really enjoy that didn't make the voting list, but I think is a very fun version, and probably because it hit me at the right point in time in 2004. I'm an Ashton Kutcher fan. Was The Butterfly Effect,
which is hilarious because when I first watched that trailer, we had literally just finished watching or creating To Change the World. We were done with principal photography, and literally I'm in an auditorium with Zach Proctor, who is our main director of photography for To Change the World. And we're sitting there watching these trailers for a QC that we were going to do. And the trailer for Butterfly Effect goes through. And Zach, as soon as the trailer ends, we weren't even sitting near each other. He was like, Zach just goes, "Hey, Jason, did we just shoot that movie?" And I was like, motherfucker, that's exactly what went through my head while I was watching the trailer to Butterfly Effect was, fuck, like literally the exact same kind of plot. They took it in different directions.
Sure.
But and what I like about Butterfly Effect is that it's self-contained, right? Like he can't travel outside of his existence, which is kind of cool and has a different way of thinking about time travel. But he can transfer his adult consciousness into any point in time from the moment he was conceived to when he's dead.
But doesn't
to current? He couldn't go to the future. He could only go
but
to
also,
the past.
Wasn't it tied to him reading his journals or whatnot? Like, didn't he have
It was kind of like he read journals and things that would help spark or watch movies of his previous self to help kind of like spark where he should go.
And it's a pretty like dark storyline if you think about it. Like, at one point when he travels back, like he watches Amy Smart when she's a kid, like her dad forced the two of them to basically make child pornography at one point.
Was that her dad? I thought that was like her uncle or something.
I'm pretty sure it was her dad.
Or maybe it was her stepdad or something.
Her stepdad, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a very dark movie, and the original ending of that movie was super, super dark.
All right, I believe is the original. I can't remember which ending is the original. I know one of the endings is him deciding to go back and strangle himself as a fetus.
That's the director. That's the original cut. Okay. Like he goes back in time into the womb.
Yeah,
it goes into the womb of himself, and he wraps the umbilical cord around himself while he's in the womb. And you find out, like, this mom who had given birth to him. You also find out that she had multiple children who
Oh.
that was the ending. That was the ending of their life. Was she kept having stillborns because these umbilical cords kept wrapping around themselves.
Oh, interesting. Oh,
And I can't
yeah.
remember if that's in the director's cut or the regular, but yeah, you find out she's had multiple kids, and then most of them passed away, and that's why she's so protective of Ashton Kutcher as a kid.
Oh man,
And then
I didn't know that. I didn't know that part of the ending.
yeah, and then you
Interesting.
also find out like the dad has the ability as well, and you
Oh,
so like the dad was he ends up going to see his dad, who is now he's a deadbeat dad, and
mm.
he hasn't seen his dad in forever. But he goes and sees his dad. And his dad's like, you can do this, can't you? And he's like, and he like freaks out on his son, and it's
Holy
because of the
cow.
fact that yeah, like so there's so many different aspects to it, but you know. With most Hollywood movies, they probably did test screenings, and the test
Sure,
screening ending didn't go so well when a baby
sure.
strangles himself on screen. So they probably were like, "Yeah, we need to make this a little bit happier." So he does the whole push Amy Smart away when she's really really young, and
Oh,
then they
yeah.
end up in an emotional way, like he like messes with her and tells her he hates her guts or something when they're really little, and
Yeah.
then she ends up it saves her because she ends up leaving that house and going to like the dad's house because I think it was the stepdad.
Stepdad. Yeah, that makes
I want to
sense.
say like
Yeah.
she goes to her dad's house instead of being at the stepdad's house, so she never has to
She
make the
never has.
child born.
Ah,
And then
gotcha.
and then they bump into Ashton Kutcher and Amy Smart's characters bump into each other at the very end of the movie while they're just like kind of living their normal
Yeah.
lives, but they look like they're completely happy. But what's really cool about the whole thing is like he keeps doing these little changes, and it's kind
Mm-hmm.
of like to change the world where he's making these little tiny changes,
Sure.
but with the butterfly effect, it completely changes so much in his life. So every
Yep.
time he jumps back and he thinks he fixes something, and then he comes to the present, everything's jacked.
Yeah,
And
I
so like
remember
there's all
Elvin
sorts of
Henson
crazy
is like
stuff.
his best friend, and like something happens to him one of the times.
Is that
Uh,
the sailboat guy?
oh no, you're right. I'm sorry, Ethan Suplee. Yeah, Ethan Suplee is his best friend. That's right.
So
Um,
yeah, Ethan Suplee's his best friend for some parts of it. Some other
yeah,
parts he's not his
he's not
best
there yet.
friend.
I remember
Yeah,
one time
and
he
so
comes back to the future and he doesn't have arms anymore. Like he got in an accident that got his arms cut off.
yeah,
Yeah,
they got blown off
blown off. Yeah,
because they made an IED by and made it too powerful by accident. So,
yeah. So yeah,
but yeah,
that's
there's all sorts of crazy stuff that goes on with that movie. I like it a lot,
yep.
and probably just because of the simple fact that you and I both enjoy time travel movies,
Sure.
and I had made its like sister theater or
Yep.
sister movie the
Did
exact
you
same year that this came out.
did you ever see The Jacket with Adrian Brody?
I did.
Him and Keira Knightley, very similar to that. I don't think it's a great movie, but it was another one that did the whole like go back in time, try to fix something, come back to the future, and see how you actually screwed everything up.
And it's almost like a Stir of Echoes version
Yeah, I could
of
see that.
like the butterfly effects because
Yeah.
it's like that one. You think butterfly effects dark? The jacket's like demented
Yes.
and dark and shot like an independent art product, and
Yeah.
whereas butterfly effect is definitely more straightforward.
When you were growing up, I remember this movie as a kid. Did you ever watch a movie in around 1989 called Millennium?
Yes,
Okay. The
the
plot of
plane that gets pulled into the future,
well, yes, but not really.
pulled out
Like,
of time.
well, basically what happens is in the future, uh, nobody can reproduce anymore, so they can't like make society anymore. So the people in the future have developed a way of time travel where they can go back in time to the moment where people are supposed to die, and so they take all the living people off of it. It starts off with a plane crash. They take all the people off the plane and replace them with already dead bodies from the future, so that when the plane crashes, there's still all the bodies there to make it look like the people were on the plane.
But
Um,
people can still reproduce in the future.
exactly. So then it plays out where like sometimes they have accidentally left futuristic devices when they've traveled back in time. So one of those devices got left on this plane and it gets discovered. So these two scientists are looking into it, and one of them realizes, hey, this happened like years before I found another one of these, at a different thing. So it becomes this. Then people from the future start sending people back to try to dissuade them from like investigating this because they're worried that they're going to get discovered. Eventually, at one point, one of the futuristic people is like, "Look, the only thing I can do is tell them the truth." So they're like, "I'm from the future. This is what we do. I need you to stop investigating this and just go on." And then it kind of is like it plays out. I can't remember what I wrote that it plays out. Um, so basically, like a couple of the characters end up finding out about this, and then basically have to, decide whether they're gonna, spill the beans on the fact that people can travel back in time and whatnot. I literally don't remember how the movie ends. It's been so long since I've seen it, but I know I watched it a couple of times as a kid.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. It reminds me of Travelers.
Yeah, we will definitely get to that in a minute. The one last movie that I wanted to talk about is a very minor time travel movie, but Happy Accidents. Do you remember that one
Fantastic
with
movie.
Vincent D'Onofrio? Yes. It's a time travel movie, but it makes you also question psychology or sanity and psychology. Vincent D'Onofrio plays a character who claims that he's from the future. He has very limited memories from his future, but those limited memories have led him to Marissa Tomei. She doesn't know what to think of it because she thinks that he's like a really creepy guy, even though like he doesn't really do anything creepy. He just wants to hang out with her and be friends with her and stuff like that. Um, and it pays off in the end, but it's it's cool how it sets up, is this guy crazy or is he really a time traveler? And it kind of gives you breadcrumbs along the way to lead you to, you know, whether he is or isn't at the end. And I thought it was very well done. And so, like you
I
said, go ahead.
I don't remember a whole lot about that movie. I remember Vincent D'Onofrio being in it. And
Yep.
You said it's Femke Jensen, right?
No, Marissa Tomei.
Oh yeah, Marissa Tomei. But so I just remember like enjoying it.
Yeah.
Like it's a pleasant movie. It's weird and different,
it's
but it's pleasant. It's quirky. It's pleasant. It's just entertaining. Like I remember watching it while we were at Castleton Arts.
Yep.
And I just remember being like, this is. It's almost like cute.
Yeah. For sure.
Like it just works.
It turns a little dark in the middle 2/3 ish through, like when she starts like getting aggressive towards him about like how she thinks he's stalking her, and like she turns on him at one point in their relationship, which is very unfortunate, but is needed for the story to go the way that it goes. But the psychologist that he ends up going to see in that movie becomes a very big and important like part of the story and the aspect of it.
Yeah.
Really, really just fun and cute and enjoyable, like indie film about a guy who claims to be a time traveler and then people trying to figure out if that's even possible. So I really enjoy that. But the last thing I want to talk about, this could be an entire episode on its own, so I don't want to get too detailed into any of these things. But there's a lot of time travel TV shows out there, like a lot of time travel TV shows. You brought up Travelers a minute ago, and that is probably my number one time traveling TV show. And I know that you really enjoy it also.
I like it a lot. I think you pointed out that sometimes it breaks its own rules that it started at the beginning.
Correct.
Which kind of gets annoying.
Yeah, I agree.
But for the most part, I tore through that show. Once I started watching it, I just kind of like definitely binged that really quickly through what is it, so 3 seasons, 4 seasons?
4 seasons total. I think you binged the first 3, and then that was before the 4th season came out.
Yeah, that and it's sad that we don't get any more of it, but yeah, it was a fantastic show.
Hold on. No, I think you watched the first 2 seasons before I think we only got 3 seasons of the show.
Yeah, I thought there was 3.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you're right. I think it's only 3. I think you binged.
And I've recommended it to other people who have like flown through it as well. So it's something that I hope my parents, whenever they get their Netflix account up and running, I've told them about it. I hope that they'll watch it because it's right up their alley. So
it's a very fun and cool concept of talking to the future and the future being able to react to it. Quick plot of the show. In the future, they have times and locations of deaths for people. So as people are
because of social media.
because of social media, so as somebody is like within seconds of their death, they're able to transport a person from the future's consciousness into that body to avert the death. Like you're debriefed on what's going to happen to you. Like one of the girls in the pilot episode is like a autistic or like mentally challenged female, and this plot line always bothered me. Like five dudes decide to basically like rape and beat the shit out of her, and it ends up killing her. So they send a girl from the future back to like moments before that's supposed to happen, and then she ends up beating the shit out of those five dudes, which is a very cool sequence. But always like before that happens is very rubbing me the wrong way that like these five dudes are fucking with like a mentally handicapped like female. Very made me very uneasy, but I enjoyed watching her beat the shit out of the five of them. That was really cool. Um, but yeah, so throughout the course of the show, a group of these time travelers come together, and they're much like 12 Monkeys. Their mission is to figure out how to stop what happens in the future from happening, and then it plays both relative and constant time travel, because sometimes they will do something and then all of a sudden find out from the future that they did change one thing. This thing didn't happen, but because that didn't happen, now something else has happened, and so now you've got to figure out how to stop this. So but literally overall, it's a super enjoyable show and one of my favorite time travel shows. And then next to that, I know you and I both were big fans of Timeless.
Yeah, so they get a genius to create a time machine, time machine pod, and then he makes a better version of it. And once he makes the better version, essentially a terrorist comes in and steals it and runs back in time and starts meddling with things. And so they put together a team of a historian, the driver, and a soldier to grab the lesser good the first version,
the prototype,
the prototype, the first generation one, and like chase them back in time and try to keep them from doing bad things to these
well,
people.
And as much as I love the show, that's one of the worst aspects of the show is the fact that the old machine is somehow telepathically connected to the new machine, so it knows.
I thought it was like but I thought the original, like the new machine, like leaves ripples whenever you travel through time, and that's how they know.
Something like that.
Yeah, whatever the case.
Yeah,
it's time travel.
Exactly. But yeah, Timeless, lots of fun. Really enjoy the show. Obviously, we can go back to the '80s with Quantum Leap. Huge show for me growing up.
And if you look at Timeless, like that was what, 2 seasons or 3? Wasn't it 2 in like a short mini series?
Yep.
Yeah,
2 like 2-hour movie.
So like you can blow through it super quick. It does a lot of history in a short period of time. All the characters are pretty awesome too. Like you understand and you feel why everything's going on, and you kind of like, even the bad guys, you're like, I can see why you're doing this.
Yeah,
like,
and one of the fun things sometimes with Timeless is they would affect something in the past and then come back to the future, and everybody in the future like wouldn't know what they were talking about. Like,
yeah,
they did a good job of doing that for like the time is relative to the people who were time traveling. Like, because they affected something in the past, they come back to the future and it's different. I can't remember exact like examples off the top of my head, but I know it happened a few times on the show. Doctor Who, huge show that I enjoy. I got into it when David Tennant was the Doctor. A lot of my friends were into it way before me. I know you've never given it a shot, but it.
I have.
I'm sorry.
I watched almost the whole first season with
Christopher Eccleston.
Yeah. And he, I thought it was kind of a very quirky character, the Doctor. It's fine. I tried and I got through most. I want to say I either got through all the first season and some of the second, or most of the first. And I was just like, okay, I'm not having as much fun as everybody else is, so it's time for me to bow out.
I got you. If you made it to the 10th Doctor, to David Tennant, that's when I started loving the show. I would text my friends while I was watching the first season, and I would be like, this episode's corny, this episode's cheesy, like, this episode looks bad. and they were always like, "You've just got to wait till you get to the second season." Like, I don't argue any of your statements, but when David Tennant became my doctor, like I was hooked on the show for a while. I've actually just now started going back and rewatching from where I stopped watching back when Peter Capaldi was the 12th Doctor, I guess. Um, I watched his first two seasons and just did not enjoy them very much. So I kind of bowed out at that point. Then they announced a female doctor, and I was like, I'm so far behind now, like it doesn't really matter. So I've started because they're all on HBO Max. I've started trying to get caught up with the show. I've watched a couple. I've watched like 6 episodes in the last week or whatever. Just to I know some of my favorite characters came back in this most recent season, so I kind of want to get caught up to see how they reintroduce Jack Harkness and stuff like that. So Doctor Who's a big one that I was very into for a long time, and then even once you get into like David Tennant and Matt Smith, you can go back and watch Christopher Eccleston and appreciate him more because a lot of the stuff. And granted, this is just like good storytelling and good story. Like this is Kevin Feige level storytelling. Like a lot of stuff that happened in that first season with the reboot with Christopher Eccleston becomes important in later episodes. So there's a lot
Gotcha.
of callbacks to stuff, and you're like, oh, okay, like that makes that episode more watchable and enjoyable. So Doctor Who's cool. Legends of Tomorrow, really enjoyed that show. It's fun. I actually haven't watched the fourth season yet. I need to watch that, but the first
I
three
don't think I
seasons I
watched the
enjoyed.
third. I think I made it through the first two, and then most of
Gotcha.
the CW Arrowverse, I've dropped all of it because it
Gotcha.
just got to the point where it was just super repetitive.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, another speedster for the Flash,
Yeah.
another assassin for Arrow.
Yeah.
It's the exact, and it's the Marvel origin story thing, just for multiple seasons, and
well,
I just kind of got sick and tired of it.
Speaking
So
of Marvel, the last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. did a lot of time travel stuff. They traveled to different points in S.H.I.E.L.D.'s history to do different stuff. Obviously, like episode 7 or 8 is Deke and Mac's Excellent Adventure, which takes place all in the 80s, and Deke has created a band and basically stolen all the popular 80s songs and covered them by himself. And really, that's a super fun episode. A lot of that last season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I enjoyed the time travel aspects of it. Pretty
yeah,
interesting.
I like the film noir episode a lot. I
Oh
thought that
yeah,
was
yeah.
fun.
There's
So
a TV show I doubt you've watched. It's called Odyssey 5. Peter
don't know what it
Weller is
is.
the main character in it. Essentially, it's about 5 astronauts that are on like a spaceship that's going out into space. It supposedly explodes when it's in like going out in like it's heading out into space and it explodes, but you find out it doesn't really explode. Like they're taken to a different astral plane, and they kind of are like wandering around in this giant white nothing. And then all of a sudden they're back on Earth 5 years previously, and they don't have any memory. Like they have all of their memories of those 5 years, but they have no memory of how they got back. Like they don't know if it was an alien or a time experiment or like what happened to cause them to jump back.
Are
So
they consciousness goes back into their previous selves?
correct. Yes.
Okay.
So all 5 of them know each other, even though like one of the guys jumps back into like his teenage body because he was like fairly young when this mission happened, and so like now he's a teenager, and then like one of the other guys like decides to go out and start placing a bunch of bets on sporting things because he's like, oh, I remember this big football game and like the guy kicked a field goal at the end to win it, so I'm gonna bet $100,000 on him kicking this field goal to win. But what I liked about the show was because he placed such a huge money bet on this guy kicking the field goal to win or for his team to win or whatever, the odds shifted into this other team's favor or whatever. So then this guy feels all this pressure when he's going up to kick this ball because he's like, "Oh man, like we're supposed to win this game. If I kick this, like a lot of people are gonna, or if I miss this, like a lot of people are gonna lose money." And the kicker gets in his own head and ends up shanking the thing, so this dude ends up losing like $100,000 because he bet it on this guy on like kicking this field goal because in the original timeline he did. So it kind of plays with like even though you know what's going to happen, it might not happen the same way if you butterfly effect, change things. Um, it's really not a show that like a lot of people would be into. It got canceled after like 19 episodes. There's no resolution to it. It leaves you on an insane cliffhanger where like there's characters who are in jail, there's characters who have been like kidnapped by this shadow organization that knows what's going on, and like it like episode 19 credits hit, and you're like, okay, next episode. Like literally, like I know it sucks. We only got 13 episodes of Firefly, but it didn't leave us on a cliffhanger that Odyssey 5 did. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. It's the whole like, like I said, their consciousness 5 years earlier. They all get back together and try to start figuring out like, do you remember what happened? Do you remember how we got back here? What's going on? Like I'm pretty sure one of Peter Weller's children had died in that 5 year period, so like he gets sent back and then like his child is alive again. So like it's a lot of like what would you do if you had 5 years worth of knowledge and you were sent back? Like it's pretty cool. Lost, one of the later seasons had time travel. I know you didn't make it very far into Lost, so I'm pretty sure you didn't see the time travel stuff. Season 2, yeah. Star Trek Discovery, I've started watching, but I'm not to the point where they time travel yet.
Funny side story for
Yeah.
Lost is I I got into it. I want to say like when season 4 was about to hit the airwaves.
Okay.
Because you were like, dude, it's so good. You got to give it a shot. And
Me?
so I finally decided that I was going to give it a shot. So I bought like the first season because I found it on sale at DVD, like at a DVD store. And it was on sale for like $20 because the 4th season's about to launch or whatever.
Sure.
And I liked the first season. And
Yeah.
so I was like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. So I bought the second season. I watched the second season. I'm like, I like this. This is fun. It's entertaining. It's cool. And then I bought the 3rd season. And this is when like DVD sets from TV shows were $80 or $90
Sure.
a piece. So I bought the 3rd set. And it was supposed to get delivered to my apartment when I lived in Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
And then it never showed.
Oh.
And everybody I talked to was basically like the postal service, the website I bought it through. Everybody was just like, you're shit out of luck. So
oh, man.
I got so upset at the fact that I was out $40 or $50.
Sure.
That I just like, I was like, fuck this. I'm done. I'm done with this show. Little did I know that 15 years later, I'd be able to watch whatever I want, whenever I want, and not pay for it.
Not pay for it.
Besides the monthly fee.
I was going to say, you pay your Netflix fee, but truth be told, you probably jumped off at the right time. Season 3 was when the writer's strike happened, and
Gotcha.
Season 3 is not very good. Like, I really like the first half of season 3. So if you saw the first 2 seasons, you saw the end of the season 2 finale is them being captured by the others. So Jack, Kate, and Michael are all captured by the others. So the beginning of season 3 starts out Sawyer. Jack, Kate, Sawyer, and Michael are all captured by the others. But they give Michael the freedom to leave with his son on the boat because he brought the other 3 to the others. So season 3 starts with those 3 main characters like in prison in like the other's prison, and it's psychological warfare, psychological torture. Like Ben Linus, who you saw in the second half of season 2, like he played that like really meek character. You find out that he's pretty much a sociopath and like basically has Hitler complex where he literally wants everybody to just do what he tells them to do type thing. But then so like the first 6 episodes I feel like are pretty solid, and then season 3 like post writer strike just kind of goes off the rails. I stuck through Lost all the way through, but I definitely say that every season declined after the first 2. Still one of my favorite TV series ever. I still own all the box sets. Like they got all my money back then because I love the show so much, but I used to tell everybody that they had to watch it. I've kind of just, I know my wife was a huge fan of it. She got into it after like the whole show was over, so she started watching it on Netflix. And like she literally said she was at a point in her life where she had to know what was happening next. Like she would, before work, watch a couple of episodes. On her lunch at work, she'd watch an episode on her phone. She'd go home and watch as many episodes as she could. So like she marathoned through like all 6 seasons in a very short period of time. But it's for some people, it isn't for others.
Well, and that was also the show that's also one of the shows where weren't they supposed to only do 3 or 4 seasons, and then the CBS executives were like,
ABC.
"What?
Yeah,
Huh?
it was ABC.
ABC. My
Yeah,
fault. You're making a whole lot of money for us, so can you
sure.
can you slow it down and just grind it out a little bit longer?"
Yeah, well, and
So
then the other issue that comes into play with Lost is when Lost the first season was going on, the people in charge of Lost were like, "Yeah, all this really weird, the smoke monster and all this weird stuff's happening, but we promise you, it's all scientifically grounded and we have an explanation for everything." And they were like, "This isn't a bunch of people stuck in purgatory." And they're like, every year
it's a
it
bunch of
gets
people stuck in
closer and closer to
purgatory.
a bunch of people just being stuck in purgatory. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's not like it technically isn't. The island, the whole show is literally about a magical island that could do, like John Locke. Before he got to the island, he couldn't walk, but because he landed on this magical island, it gave him the ability to walk again. That's all real. That's not purgatory. That's not fake. It's literally a TV show about a magical island. They just eventually get you to the point where everybody's dead.
So what you're saying, it's a fantasy island.
It's a very much a fantasy island. Well, and then like
Look
now,
past the plane.
so that's been our talk about time travel, literally moving characters through time. Well, and with Doctor Who, space and time.
Interstellar.
Next week's episode, we're going to do time loop films, which I think there's only like 8 or 10 of them. So not a whole lot for us to talk about, but we'll try to talk about each one of them. Groundhog Day is unfortunately on this list, so I'm gonna have to talk about that movie. But there are a couple of other ones on this time loop thing, specifically Palm Springs, that I'm looking forward to talk about. But that's been everything this week. Jason, you got anything before we go? Any time travel stuff?
No.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Next week we'll be back talking about a little different version of time travel. We'll talk some time loopage, and we'll go from there. Thanks you guys for listening this week.